Work is both important and urgent, whereas friendships are important but not often very urgent. So unfortunately, we may not prioritize friendships.
What can we do to fight harder to keep our friends?
Grace Entra is the co-founder of Friendzone SG, where she spent the last 8 years studying, building, and teaching something most of us were never taught: how to build friendships that actually last.
If you ever looked around one day and realized your circle got smaller, your group chats got quieter, all the people you thought would stay didn't, Grace is here to shed some light on that.
As we grow older, the more successful we get at what we do, it does get lonelier.
As humans, we do get jealous of other people. So at the risk of sounding cheesy, what I mean by this is
A recent article actually states that 1 in 10 Singaporeans report having no close friends. Do you feel that we are failing as human beings?
I think the challenge is that friendships are not a part of life that we have been taught to prioritize. You know, when you think about the Singapore life narrative or goals in life, right? Okay, graduate, get a good job, get married, have kids. You never really think about friendships as being an important core pillar of life that we should focus on and prioritize. So I do think, unfortunately, many of us take friendships for granted as just something that we have in life.
We have this hustle culture, rat race, right? And we're so connected by social media. What kind of impact do you think this environment that we are in here in Singapore actually has on us building meaningful friendships?
I do think that in our culture, work is very important, right? People prioritize their jobs and financial security. And the thing about work is that work is both important and urgent, whereas friendships are important but not often very urgent. Unfortunately, we tend to focus on what is important and urgent,
Right, yes.
which more often than times is the demands of work.
What can we do to fight harder to keep our friends?
I think definitely being intentional about journeying with our friends through the different life stages. A big reason why friendships fade is just because people move into different life stages or different career paths with different schedules. So if I go into the example of life stages, like I recently became a mom and very few of my friends are in that parenthood stage. But it's actually been quite powerful for me to see my friends who aren't parents take an interest in wanting to hear more about my experience becoming a mom. If you can find friends that are willing to grow alongside you despite going in different paths, that's a very wonderful thing. But then again, also accepting that, hey, if your friends really do see a convergence and you can't really connect anymore, that's also okay. But then it's important then to build new friends in the new season of life that you're in that can support you in the current version of who you are.
As we grow older, the more we focus on our careers, the more we focus on our work, the more successful we get at what we do, it does get lonelier, right? Why do you think that happens to people? Is it jealousy? And how can a person navigate that?
I think there are two parts to this question. So the first part to this question is the idea that when you get to the top, you are in a very different context and environment with different pressures that not everyone may understand. For example, if you're the boss of an organization or you have responsibilities like, bringing in money for the organization and you have more mouths to feed, there are not many people who can truly empathize with you in that kind of a situation. And that's why I do think that people who are in very senior roles should ideally build friendships with people in similar senior roles and perhaps either in the same organization or across organizations. I think a more simpler way to think about it is industry friends. Let's say you are a nurse. The pressures of what it is to be a nurse is very different from the pressures of what it is to work in a marketing agency. That's why it's important to make friends with people in similar seniority to you, but also in the same industry, just so that you have friends who can understand and empathize with. And then the second part of it is also navigating jealousy. That's about which dimension of it, meaning that are they peers that you have journeyed with, for example, in the same company or the same industry that you have risen with, and then it comes to a point where maybe one person gets a promotion, one doesn't, one person gets the deal, the other person doesn't. So at the risk of sounding cheesy, what I mean by this is that when people progress in their careers, it's important to celebrate one another's wins. I mean, that's the ideal situation. But being human, of course, if you see someone else succeeding or living the life that you wanted to live or you desire to live, it does sting. And inevitably, as humans, we do get jealous and envious, right, of other people. But then it's about how do we internally process those emotions that we are feeling. Does that jealousy inspire us to do better? To like, hey, someone else, my peer has achieved this, I can also achieve it too, but maybe my path and my timeline will be a bit different. And then again, if you're on the other end of it, where you think your friends are being jealous of you, I would say it's also important then to be sensitive, right? Especially if you know that what you have achieved is something that your friend so desired for. That be conscious that you're not flaunting it in their face. But I would say this also comes down to what is the strength of the relationship in the first place. I've also heard stories of how friends have really made workplace friendships work. Right, when someone gets promoted over them, to also say that, okay, this is us in our work hats, and this is us in our friend hats. So what that looks like is when we're in meetings, I respect you as my boss and the authority you have over me because that's the role that we have. But outside of the meeting, when we're having lunch, we are friends. Right? And so then it also requires a certain level of maturity for both people to acknowledge the different roles that they have.
Do you think our culture, our race, or our religions actually play a part in how we form friendships, or is it actually a limitation?
The environments that we find ourselves in institutionally can shape a lot of the friendships that we have. Meaning that, for example, if you grow up in a school that is very conscious about diversity quotients, right? Because you are just a student, right? The only people that you meet are just whoever is also in the school with you. So that, to a certain extent, is out of your hands. It's similar in the workplace, right? If you're in a workplace where everyone around you is from the same race, then it's also hard for you because you're not the one hiring your colleagues, right? That's on your boss for who they choose to hire. But I mean, then again, you can also have individual agency. If you recognize that your social circles are a bit homogenous, there are things that you can do to consciously build new friends or to build relationships with people who are different than you. So it could be a choice of, okay, this company is very one type. Maybe you will consciously find a different job, you know, in your next role, or seek an environment where there's more diversity.
And how do you think cultural diversity actually helps us as individuals?
I think it definitely helps with helping you to realize that the world is not just how you see it. I think oftentimes we sometimes get stuck in our heads based on how we imagine our lives should be like, based upon our own upbringing, our families of origin, the cultural expectations that we have, the media that we consume that has perhaps shaped certain ideals in our lives. But when we meet more people from a broader range of environments or backgrounds, that opens our eyes to how life can be lived differently. I think earlier I spoke about the importance of having both close friends and acquaintances, which links back to this point, is that the importance of having acquaintances is that they open up new doors of possibility for you. Right? So similar to the whole idea of having friends from different cultures or different races and different nationalities, they open up a window into a different world that you may not have seen.
Another interesting thing that we actually, came across is, the Zodiac signs, and MBTI. Do you actually think that it's helping us or doing us more damage, complicating how we make friends?
Yeah, I think that I would advise people to take it with a pinch of salt.
Okay.
Yeah, in the sense that I do think that these kinds of tools can be useful for building bridges. For example, like, hey, Leo, hey, it's a common point of conversation. It's just finding common ground, right? But I do think that it's important to not typecast a person based on a certain personality assessment. Because at the end of the day, I think over the years I've done MBTI. My MBTI has changed so many times.
Because we evolve, right, as a person.
And so likewise, it's important that even if we use MBTI as a way to get a glimpse into how a person is like, to not typecast as they are this kind of person.
I've got this question that I've been burning to ask you, right? Are extroverts better friends than introverts?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I have so many great friends who are introverts, and I do think that different people bring different things to the table. I mean, one of the things that introverts often say is that they just enjoy listening, you know, to hearing the stories of other people. And that in itself is such a great skill for building a friendship. I mean, when one person creates a safe space for someone to listen to them. Extroverts do bring a certain energy, but it's not to say that introverts don't bring an energy too. What I often hear is a lot of introverts are just introverted at the start, but once they find someone that they're very comfortable with, you can see that introverts really come alive.
What impact does having a good solid friendship circle have on us?
There's this article I remember hearing about when I was younger called "Your Friends Are Making You Fat." Have you heard about this one? The core idea is just that your friends are a big influence on you.
All right, okay.
So let's say if you have a friend who is always inviting you to go for supper, to eat McDonald's, then you get influenced by your friends, right? So then you'll go and be a bit more unhealthy, as opposed to if you have healthy friends, who are always encourage you, to go for runs or to join them for high rocks training or something. You might be convinced the other way to live a healthier lifestyle. We cannot understate the influence that the right friends or healthy friendships can have on our lives. Right? On one hand, in terms of the perspective that they give us, I mean, the advice that they give when you're going through something and you like say, hey, I'm really struggling at work, like what do I do about my boss? And a wise friend gives you some sound advice and you're like, you know what, okay, that's a good way to think about it. Let me go back to my workplace and try those things out. So having friends that you can turn to share your life struggles with, that provide a safe space for you to be heard, and then also give you good advice.
There's another interesting wave of friendships that are forming, right? Like parasocial relationships where, I'm not sure if you've seen, but in certain countries, they have relationships with inanimate objects. Can this be considered real?
My definition of a relationship is that it's two-way, and there is back and forth, there's reciprocity, there's feedback. But when it comes to relationships with inanimate objects, you don't really get a response. And this inanimate object can't really call you out, know you well. I don't want to judge, right? I don't know these people, and I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what their thinking is. But what I would say is perhaps what matters to me, I think, is having a relationship where I am known and I'm seen, and there's that reciprocity. I think that's a bit different from AI, whereas now if I'm conversing with a chatbot, the AI can, pull from all its language models and give me a consolidated response. So that's a very new dynamic, which I think is, like you said, emerging. Personally, I think what's important with AI is just to know that this is not a real human being, and then to be conscious about your relationship with it. So I have seen AI being very helpful in building friendships, in the sense that when people don't know what to say. So for example, a friend comes to you with a personal struggle and you want to support the friend, but you don't know how to
approach it,
say it tactfully, or to sound caring enough. So what I have observed with young people is that they will go to AI and say, my friend shared this situation with me. This is what my thoughts are. Can you help me to refine my response so that I can sound more supportive and empathetic? So I do feel like in that kind of context, it is helpful, because what you're doing is you're using the AI to sharpen your communication skills, and hopefully you are learning and considering the response the AI gives, and say, okay, that's a really great way to respond to a friend. Maybe I'll pick and choose a few sentences from here to say back to my friend. But hopefully the gist of it is from yourself, because relationship skills and even communication skills is not something that many people learn.
You've also shared that friendship is a skill, and communication doesn't naturally come to everybody. What strong advice would you have for people?
Practice. Practice. There's no way about it than putting yourself out there, practicing, and then reflecting on the experience, and then trying again. Friendzone started this thing called School of Yapping last year. So we're at our second cohort now, but it's really a safe space for young people to come and practice showing up and practice yapping. We have facilitators in small groups that actually give participants feedback. Some of this feedback could be about the first impressions that they come across as having. Some people may not realize it, but they may come across looking very unfriendly. Like very stern. Yeah. And even conversation habits. Some people with different mannerisms, or the way that they ask questions, or they don't ask follow-up questions. I don't know if you've ever been in such a situation before where you're talking to someone and they just give you one-word answers.
Oh, yes.
And it's very frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Yes.
But then who's going to tell this person that, hey, you need to elaborate more? Can you please ask me questions about my life? Yeah. But unless we give people that feedback, then they also won't know, or perhaps have the self-awareness to know.
If you look at children, right, they make friends so easily. Why do you think it's harder for adults to do the same?
Adults were a bit more reserved, a bit more shy, a bit more afraid to put ourselves out there. Just because you don't know how someone will interpret what you're trying to say. As a kid, it's a bit different, because at that age, there's no stakes, or very few stakes involved. Your only goal in life is just to have fun.
And be happy.
And play in the playground. Whereas as an adult, you have a lot less time, you have more priorities, you have a lot more responsibilities.
Just interestingly, just to kind of dive into that, right? Starting a conversation, how important is that?
It's so important to be the one to take initiative. I also find that it's not something that many Singaporeans often do. I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing, right? A personal story. When I first started Friendzone, that was 7-8 years ago, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, if I want to build friendships with other young people in my neighborhood, I must start by connecting with them. So I gave myself a challenge. Every time I get into a lift, if I see another young person, I will start a conversation with them. So I remember there was this one time I got on the lift with this guy, and I said, hi. He's like, do I know you?
Oh my god, we
And I
were
was
just
like-
talking
I'm
about
like,
this.
no, but I'm just trying to be friendly. And then
Right.
he's like, oh, okay, hi. Because I think it's just not common culturally, right, for people to start conversations with one another. And sometimes people are afraid, like, is this a insurance agent? Are they trying
Are
to
you
scam
trying to
me?
get a sale off me?
right? So I do think taking the initiative to be open and also being open to rejection is part of the process.
How then do we overcome that rejection?
I think one thing is managing your expectations, right? I mean, even in the dating context, right? People expect that it's not the first date you're gonna go on with someone, you'll marry this person. So likewise with friendships or even networking, it's not like the first person you're gonna randomly strike a conversation with will become your bestie. So I do think it's about, I mean, firstly keeping it into perspective and also acknowledging that not everyone you meet will be your person or your type or vibe. Accepting or knowing that friendship resilience or even networking resilience is just part of the process. Then you become more comfortable with that trial and error of things.
Right. You mentioned the person, right? Like I think of this show called Grey's Anatomy, and then there's the two characters, Christina and Meredith.
Yeah.
They are each other's person. Do you think that still applies in today's
The
context?
concept of a best friend.
Yeah.
If we place so much pressure on one person to be everything to us, then that makes it difficult for us and also difficult for the friend who bears the weight of all of our expectations, our hopes, and our dreams. A big part of understanding what makes a healthy social circle is also knowing that it's about having both close friends and acquaintances, but also having friends for the different dimensions of who you are.
What do the people who are able to maintain friendships, right, long term what are they good at? What are they doing right?
What I've seen in people who have been very successful at maintaining friendships is putting in the effort and also reciprocating. Yeah. So I think that in friendships, there's often a dynamic of one person who is the one who initiates and the other person is the one who accepts. And oftentimes we may not be so conscious about the dynamic. Like, think about your own friendships. So if there's that mutual reciprocity and that commitment to keeping the friendship alive, I think that's what keeps friendships going. One thing that really helps with friendship maintenance is growing together. So maintaining that curiosity about each other's lives despite changes. What I've also seen some people do is they set regular times. If they have a certain friend group that is really important to them, they'll say, okay, maybe every first Monday of the month, like that is our girls' night, and we will, no matter what happens that first Monday of the month, you just block it.
What do you think of these low maintenance friendships? Are we just kind of making excuses for ourselves?
I think the first thing that's important to talk about is what's this definition of low maintenance friendships, because different people will have different ideas or concepts of what that means. The idea to me of a low maintenance friendship is someone who I'm not in constant communication with,
Right.
or I may not see regularly, but there is an established security and dependability and reliability about that friendship. So in my mind, my low maintenance friendships are people who perhaps I haven't seen in a few months, but if I were to call them up, like, they would be there for me. The danger with low maintenance friendships is when both parties are not on the same page about what the friendship means to them.
Right.
Meaning
Not
that,
having that conversation.
yeah, meaning that, for example, I may see this friendship as a low maintenance friendship, but maybe you may see it as, hey Grace, you're not prioritizing me anymore. So I no longer see you as a friend because you haven't been making the time for me. So I do think low maintenance friendships can work when both parties agree to what that means or what that looks like. But otherwise, it could be prone to misunderstanding. And then it gets painful when people don't see the friendship in the same way.
With friendships comes ups and downs, definitely, right? And then you have these, I'll use the word toxic friendships, where you seem to be the one sort of giving and giving and giving, and maybe the other person is sort of like taking and taking and taking, and that can happen. How do we handle that?
That's a really great question. And I think what I want to do to start is just to nuance it a bit, just because I do think that different people can be draining for different reasons. Right? So when we think about the full spectrum of when we think about people who drain us in friendships, it could be a case where someone is just so negative all the time. Every time we hang out with them, they're just complaining or venting and just being so negative. Then again, there's also situations when you catch up with a friend and your friend is going through a very difficult time. Perhaps they have lost a loved one, or they have just had a very unexpected and very painful breakup. So when you meet up with such a friend, of course you feel so drained by the interaction. So I think it's important to know and to assess based upon what the issue is that you are feeling drained about. Right? If, for example, a friend is going through something difficult, and I mean grief, right? The loss of someone is something that doesn't just resolve itself overnight. And it could be a situation where it could be like weeks, it could be months when you're catching up with this person. And they are a mess because they are just struggling with something so difficult that every time you hang out with them, you do feel drained. But I think that's part of being a friend, right? Letting your friends drain you. Because if you are in their shoes, you would also want them to hold the space for you, for them to pour out their frustrations and their difficulties with. But then again, it's like, to what extent? Right?
And does it get toxic?
Yeah, for example, like let's say you have a friend who had a terrible breakup, and then the first like couple months, you're there to support them, and then it just keeps going, and the person it never ends, and the person's just letting themselves be stuck in that situation, right? So as a friend, how can you better support the friend? Is it about reaching a point and saying like, hey, I don't know how to help you anymore. I think maybe you need like therapy or you need counseling to help you to move forward from this breakup, right? And then because there's only a certain extent that you can really help your friends out. What I would say, it's also perhaps spacing out those friendships a bit more, spacing out the meetings.
How can the friend respectfully tell the other friend that, look, this is not working out?
Yeah. I think part of it also comes down to your approach on friendships. Like what I've seen some people do is they just consciously let it fade. If this person is just too difficult, then they invite me out. I'll say, oh, sorry, I'm busy. I can't make it. Right? It's also about prioritizing other friendships that perhaps are a bit more life-giving or a bit more energizing in that season of your life, which is fair. I mean, we all make choices about how we want to spend our time. So what I've seen is some people may actively just deprioritize this friendship. And then again, if you are in the approach of wanting to like call your friend out and be like, hey, you know what, this is not me, this is you.
Yeah.
And I really can't take this anymore. I mean, if you care about your friend enough to want to tell them that like you need to go and get help, or like I can't handle this anymore, then it's also just respectfully letting them know, hey, I've been thinking about our friendship, and there's stuff about our friendship that I'm not very comfortable with, or I'm not very happy with the current dynamic. No, it's not that different from relationship conflicts with our spouses or like our partners. Being in relationship is also about expressing our needs and hoping to get our needs met. In any relationship in our life, we are always just sweeping things under the carpet or bottling things up and not sharing about how we feel. Then it's very difficult. And also, you may never know that this person may not even realize the impact that they are having on you. So you could feel totally drained by this friend, but this friend may not even realize that this is the impact of their behavior on you. So if you suddenly like ghost them or you suddenly call them out, they're like, huh, really? I didn't even know that.
Right.
Then it could actually even be a case of good self-awareness and growth for them to realize that, hey, this is the impact that I'm having on other people, and this is not the impact I want to have on other people. But if you don't give our friends the opportunity to change, if you don't let them know, then perhaps they may not even see it themselves because it's just a blind spot for them.
Right. So it's good to actually share with them instead of letting it fade away.
That's also part of if you feel that you want to have that conversation. So I do think that, in adulthood, many people would just rather let the friendship fade than go through conflict or go through the task of having a difficult conversation.
When a friendship ends, Grace, is that closure important?
I think, once again, it depends on the person. I have friendships in my life where I've seen the friendship fade and I don't want it to fade. And I can see the other person is not reciprocating as much. But part of it is also just accepting that if this person isn't prioritizing this friendship, then I need to accept it and let it go. Also with a breakup, sometimes you just, based on the actions and the behavior of a person, you can kind of tell. Then it's the closure for yourself or the closure because you just want this person to know like how much you hurt me.
Yeah.
Right? This is all the frustrations I have towards you. It really depends.
Sometimes it's just okay to let go and not say anything. We also tend to make best friends out of our romantic partners. They become our therapists, our best friends, our financiers, and all of that. Do you think that's actually healthy in that sense?
I do think that building intimacy with your partner is so important. But then again, it's not just about having one person to be everything for you, because that person may not be able to support you in all areas of your life or share the same level of interest or passion or excitement. So what I mean by that is I really enjoy rock climbing. Right. And my husband does not. So I will go climbing 1 to 2 times a week and I will invite him along, but he will always reject me. Whereas for him, his current obsession is Pokemon cards.
Oh,
which
okay.
I do not share the same interest in. But then he has other friends in his life that he can go Pokemon card shopping and hunting and have really long conversations about Pokemon cards with. So as a partner, I do think that what's enough is to be curious about what each other is interested in and to respect that. But we don't need to be super into it.
Have you personally struggled with loneliness? And if so, what did you do to fix it?
I lived on campus as an undergraduate And living on campus is really just living in a HDB block full of other young people.
Yeah.
It's people in the same life stage as you with lots of opportunities to meet and socialize. But when I moved back home after graduation, I realized I didn't know anyone who lived around me. Starting Friendzone was my own way of solving my own pain point, which is realizing I didn't have any friends who lived nearby. And most of my friends lived on the other side of Singapore. Even then, it's like 1 hour, 1.5 hours.
Right.
But you know, when you're so time scarce as a working adult, you sometimes just want the spontaneity of having people who live nearby and that are
Go to
slightly
the
more
coffee
accessible.
shop or something like
Yeah,
that.
like spontaneous, like, hey, want to go for supper? Hey, want to go for a run? The second thing I think is important when we talk about loneliness is also important to unpack which part of our lives we feel lonely in. Loneliness isn't just a one broad homogeneous concept, meaning that you could be someone with, let's say, a lot of friends in your workplace, but you feel very lonely in your hobbies. So it could be a sense that in one dimension or one zone or one attribute of your life, you feel very lonely in, but you could feel that you have a lot of friends in another area. Recently, I became a mother. I have a baby now, he's 5 months old.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. And I realized that I didn't really have mom friends.
Oh, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah,
That
but
support. Yeah.
because I was the first amongst my friend groups to have a kid. So transitioning into a new life stage, then I realized I need to find mom friends. You know? So I think part of it is also being self-aware of knowing that, okay, I do feel connected, like I do have good friends. And in other areas of my life, I have people I can talk to about work, I have people that I can go climbing with, but people who I can relate with about motherhood, like, that's a new part of my life that I need to build social support in. So I think when you are a bit clearer about what that specific dimension of loneliness is, then you can take action to solve for that problem for yourself.
Right. That brings me to another one question. How do we get that clarity?
What I would say is that what can help is to take a pause and take stock about all your different social goals and the different parts of your life, and then identify, hey, is there any area I wish I had more support and more friends in?
What is a sign that we are lonely? Maybe we don't think of ourselves as being lonely.
I guess when something happens and you have a question, is there someone you can turn to ask for the answer? That isn't Google and that isn't AI.
Okay, right. Okay, no AI,
Yeah,
right. Okay.
like a person with their own lived experience that could give you a perspective. And if you have someone that you can turn to that could answer that question, I think that would be a good sign that, okay, there's a relationship in my life that I can tap upon for this particular need.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Grace. That was
Welcome.
really wonderful.
If this conversation gave you something to think about, don't stop here. Every episode on Open House is a chance to see the why behind success, resilience, and growth. Click on the video on your screen. This is the one you're meant to see next.